Good vibrations.
Well, we're going back today to a subject area we have discussed before, but unfortunately the problem is still with us, so we need to continue addressing it. When the problem goes away, we can all stop needing to do these shows, and we can get on with enjoying our lives the way we should have a right to. So I'm talking about geoengineering, chemtrailing, weather manipulation, whatever name you want to put on it. I'm sure the subject area will be very familiar to regular listeners to this show. Maybe there's people new to this series that don't know that much about it, in which case I hope today's episode will be of use. But even for people who are familiar with it, there might be some new aspects, and we need to continue talking about this because it is affecting us all. So my guest is academic and organic farmer turned activist and filmmaker Matt Landman. He's the guy behind the documentary Frankenskies, which came out last year with, I believe, a follow-up volume imminent. So Matt, welcome.
Thank you, Mark, so much for having me. I'm happy to be being heard on your side of the pond.
Indeed, and hopefully talking to you today will open up your work to a new audience in the UK or beyond who might not be that familiar with what you've done. And I know you'll have told this story 1,000 times, and you probably wish you could just hit the play button on a recording to answer the question for you. But if you could bear to go through it all just one more time for the benefit of a UK audience, can you give us just a brief potted history of what led you from your previous way of life to become the dedicated activist against geoengineering that you now are?
Yes, happily, and I love telling my story. So no big deal. It's my life, right, and cool. Yes, I have told it a bunch of times, but I do. Every time I'm on a different show, and every time I talk to a new person, I grow. I grow every single day, every year. So the story it changes a little bit because I change. Sure. So my life, I was a pretty normal young man. I grew up just outside of Washington, D.C. I had just about every job you could imagine. I worked in construction, I worked in banks, I worked in restaurants, and finally I found myself in California with the dream of getting into filmmaking. I eventually left Los Angeles because that wasn't working out for me, and I ended up in Northern California, back in school, studying film and studying finance. I got a master's in business administration with a focus in strategic sustainability. Got out of school, and again, I was back in the office and back in the cubicle. I was a finance analyst. I was analyzing commodities, and finally I got the opportunity to get grounded, and I left that job, and I worked as an organic farmer, growing pumpkins, organic winter squash, a dozen varieties of potatoes, and I was in my mid-30s, and I had gone through so much education, and I did not know a potato in the ground grew a potato. So that was really one of my first awakenings, realizing the disconnect of all of the programming that we go through and the indoctrination that we go through, and we're literally not told the real facts about how to build your credit, or that a potato grows potatoes, or that the weather is being controlled, Yeah. And so what was going on, particularly during this juncture in 2012 in Northern California, where I was living, is California was experiencing a very critical drought. What was going on is the jet stream that traditionally comes off the Pacific Ocean and hits the Pacific Northwest, and this is for thousands of years. We've got gigantic 2,000-year-old redwood trees, 2,000-year-old gigantic redwood trees, and they're used to this ecosystem. The seasonal deluge of moisture comes off the Pacific Ocean in the form of this atmospheric river, which is called the jet stream. And what the jet stream traditionally does is it hits this portion of the United States, which stretches from San Francisco all the way up to Vancouver, Canada, and it is this temperate rainforest that is traditionally gets a seasonal deluge from around October to March. It rains, and it doesn't stop. It just rains this entire time. And what was happening during this specific time frame is we were about 3 or 4 years deep into this really harsh drought. There was a high pressure bubble that was positioned over the coast of California, and the jet stream that would traditionally come right across the continental United States it was hitting this large high pressure bubble and going up and around. And so it was missing California. Well, some storms were getting through. And in this particular instance, I was working on the farm, and it was time to harvest these pumpkins because it was mid-October, and we had this Doppler radar at our farm, and we were farmer Paul, my boss, he came out and he said, tomorrow come in with your rain boots on because it's going to be pouring rain. We're expecting 1 week of rain. And I went home and I looked for myself on the internet and I looked for myself on the news, and the meteorologist said 100% chance of rain for the next week. And not only that, but the amphibious creatures that lived underneath my house, the frogs and the salamanders, they were all coming out in anticipation of this gigantic storm. You could see where I lived, you could see the storm clouds rolling in off the ocean. I lived just 2 miles from the ocean. And where I worked on the farm, you could hear the waves crashing on the beach. We were so close to the ocean. So I go to work with my rain boots on, with my raincoat on, ready to be working in the rain. But I was okay with it because the farm needed the rain. The whole state needed the rain. For people that don't know, most of the world's almonds, for instance, come from California. And their almonds need a lot of moisture. So we really needed this rain. So I was out there ready to work in the rain, and here comes these gigantic black storm clouds rolling off the ocean. And I was expecting it to start pouring rain while I was at work. And just on the edge of the storm system came about a dozen jets. Now, where I lived in rural Northern California, the air traffic was particularly sparse. Now, I have a background in statistics, and I can say as a statistician that it was a statistically abnormal, irregular pattern of appearance where there would be this significant uptick in air traffic on the edge of the storm system. But anybody looking up could tell you that generally speaking, we get a few planes flying over per day. Just a few per day. So having 12 planes all at once on the edge of a storm, and these planes were leaving these particular linear cirrus clouds from the back. They were leaving these white lines. And I thought nothing of it. Literally, I just looked up and said, that seems like a lot of planes. And the planes crisscrossed the sky. The sky turned into a milky white. The storm cloud, the black storm cloud came, and it didn't drop any rain at all. The next day I went to work. The planes were still there. They were flying amongst the black clouds below them, and they were still leaving this grid pattern of persistent linear cirrus cloud formations. And I still didn't think anything of it. The week of black sky from the storm, it persisted, and eventually the storm passed, and we didn't get any rain. And my boss, Farmer Paul, he says, well, golly, that was weird. We could have really used that rain. Well, we harvested the pumpkins and got them out of the fields, but they're not going to rot, so no big deal. Thanks for your hard work. And I went on living my life, but I had the memory, and it was in my brain, okay? And I went on doing my thing. I actually we ended up harvesting all the potatoes and all the winter squash for the year. And finally, I was talking to a friend back home, okay, because I'm from the East Coast. I'm from Washington, D.C. area. I grew up with a lot of, I want to call them grounded, a lot of people who don't really believe in this kind of thing, a lot of people that ended up working for government contractors and what have you. And a friend of mine, he was talking about just what humanity, the direction of humanity, and what 9/11 did for terrorism, and what all this nonsense with the American war machine and all this stuff, and trying to talk sense into people. And he said to me, well, I mean, people can deny this, people can deny that, but how can they deny chemtrails? They're right in your face. And I said to him, what's that mean? And he said, the planes that spray the stuff in the sky. And that alone, okay, and I can't stress this enough because people don't realize the importance of getting the word out and talking to their friends about things that matter. This little taste in my head, right? It planted this seed, and that seed literally grew in my head, and I started looking at the sky and wondering, did I witness something that day in Northern California on that farm? And so I started doing some research, and it took me one day to realize that something was up, that I'd seen something that day. And then I started looking at the sky and looking at the planes, and I saw planes that didn't leave anything at all. And I saw that that was the norm. That was most of the time. And then again, we were supposed to get rain again in Northern California. We were in this critical drought. And again, this irregular pattern of appearance of not just more air traffic, but more air traffic leaving persistent linear cirrus cloud formations. They came and they sprayed the skies, and the storm clouds didn't drop any rain. So come to find out, there were other Californians who were aware. And
so what year are we talking about here, Matt? How far back?
2012, 2013.
So this was all completely new to you at this stage?
It was all new to me, but my curiosity had been piqued, and so I started digging because I was so curious if I had developed this very loose theory in my head that something had happened that day, that I had witnessed something. It was supposed to rain. These planes showed up and it didn't rain. Something happened.
So you yourself were walking around underneath these trails, and yet up to that point you were completely oblivious to it because you had no reason to look up and start taking notice, or nobody alerted you to it. So you yourself are a case in point, and that's the way it is with most people. Until they're given a reason or somebody directs their attention to what's going on in the skies, they tend not to be aware of it. It's incredible, but that's how this agenda has managed to get so far advanced. So that's what it's all about, giving people that reason to look up and getting that awareness. There's still a big job to be done there.
Well, it's completely true, brother. And what's amazing is I don't leave the house without a stack of flyers now. I have a very, very simple flyer that just brings attention to the sky. It's not saying, hey, you're dumb for not knowing. It's not saying, hey, you're being sprayed with this or they're controlling the weather. It just brings attention to looking up. Yeah, just to look up. And I've had people right in front of my eyes look up and start asking questions.
Well, there's a couple of interesting reactions I've had personally to trying to get awareness of this stuff, which I'll just share with you. The first thing is I do a job as a private hire driver just to pay the bills. I drive business folk to and from airports, and a lot of them are American. And there was this one time I had this American woman in the car, and she struck up a conversation about fracking. Out of nowhere, she just mentioned how concerned she was about fracking back home. So I thought, oh, this is great. I've got an awake, aware person here. So I said to her, well, the other thing, of course, the other big problem is chemtrailing. And she said, chem what now? Never heard of it. So I said, have you never looked up and seen these crisscross lines in the skies coming from planes? And they fan out and make this milky kind of sky that blocks out the sun. And she said, no, I've never noticed that, which I found incredible. So I said, well, you might want to look into that then. And the other thing was, I was picking my daughters up from school one day, and it was a day of heavy trailing, and I got into a conversation with one of the other mums, and I said, what do you think about all this that's going on? And directed her attention to what was happening above her head. And the evidence was right there to be seen. But she still didn't want to acknowledge it. She just kind of laughed nervously, looked at me like I was crazy, made her excuses, and couldn't wait to shuffle off. So there we are. That's the kind of public reactions that we're up against.
And that's exactly right. And I deal with it almost every day. I kind of try to pick my battles. I've gotten to the point now after 3 straight years. 3 years ago, I devoted my day in, my day out, my entire life to exposing and stopping this crime against humanity. Okay? And I'm at the point now where I can look at a person and know, I can gauge their reactions, and I try to pretend like my flyers cost $100 each. So I'm not going to hand my flyer to someone who's going to scoff at me, ridicule me, and throw the flyer away. Right. You know what I mean? Right. And so what happened in California, after I started doing my research, I found out that a lot of people had been looking up and had been asking questions. And come to find out, people had started doing rainwater samples and researching the patents on weather modification, weather engineering, climate engineering, all these different patents that exist that kind of tell the story. The patents really do tell the story because they patent the technology so that no one can steal it from them because they have that technology. And then They launch it, and it's literally visible in our skies. They have barium release rockets. We see these rockets that have these up-down trajectory. They're priming the sky with barium so they can come along and mix another ingredient with it to do their weather manipulation or what have you. So come to find out, what I witnessed that day on that farm was aerosolized aluminum being sprayed from jets. Evidently, there's cloud seeding. And if you watch my movie, you can see that this whole agenda, there's a timeline to it. It goes all the way back to the 1930s. Sure. And they've been perfecting their technology and building and sharpening their tools since the 30s. So if you want it to rain, you can spray silver dust in the atmosphere, essentially. And what silver does is it'll attract the water to the silver molecules, and the water will get heavy. It'll drop out of the sky. It'll make it rain. You can also make it snow. Ski resorts even do this. They make it snow. Well, on the contrary to that, if you spray aerosolized aluminum oxide, it actually dissipates moisture. Okay, so opposed to the silver that's hygroscopic, which attracts the water, the aluminum will spread out and attract the water to spread out so that the water doesn't get heavy and it doesn't fall out of the clouds. So what I was witnessing on that amazing day that changed my life in Northern California is I was witnessing the quelling of storms by spraying aluminum into clouds.
So there's a couple of obstacles that we're up against. One is that the official sources are telling people that these trails are just harmless contrails, water vapour, nothing to worry about, folks. And because most people don't have any reason to mistrust authorities, they just accept that and think that the rest of us are crazy. Then there's the other factor, which is, by my reckoning, you'd have to be probably 30 years of age or over by now to retain any memory of what things used to be like, clear blue skies consistently, bearing in mind this current phase of the agenda has been going on for probably the best part of 20 years. So you'd have to be 30 plus to remember, better days and more sane times. And then you've got the fact that chemtrails are being painted into everything from kids' cartoons to images on cereal packets to help reinforce the idea that this is what skies look like, folks. It's normal, nothing to see here. So you have a whole generation being raised on that type of mind control and brainwashing. And there's a section of your film that acknowledges that if enough people did gain a full understanding of what this nefarious agenda is all about, they would be outraged and they would demand that it ends. Particularly when you factor in the massive rise in dementia and Alzheimer's, which is linked to all the aluminium particulates in the air, or aluminum, as you guys in America would say. So many people's relatives are going down now with dementia and Alzheimer's, and if people would realise that so much of this can be linked with all this crap that's in the air, I really feel there would be outrage. So again, the key to it is getting the numbers and winning over the unconverted.
It's completely true. And for the youth who haven't seen the sky as long as you and I, and you're exactly right, 30 years of age is about the cusp. That's very important. But I'll be honest with you, it's easy to wake up even a 6-year-old if you bring to their attention the irregular pattern of appearance. There still are skies that are blue with nothing going on. There still are days where the planes do not have anything coming out of the back. Right. Okay, there's an irregularity to the pattern of the appearance of the persistent linear cirrus cloud formations coming out of the back of these jets. That alone is enough to plant the seed to start asking the questions, in my opinion.
Right. So we're told it's contrails and it's just normal water vapour emissions. But certain days you see none of it. You have completely clear, completely blue natural skies. Then the next day there's 250 planes dumping white crap in the sky. Do people not think those differences from one day to the next are a bit strange?
Exactly. And after I've done my due diligence and researched the topic, almost more than anybody on earth, I would imagine. But I've researched it to the point to learning that the new airplanes are all outfitted with these high bypass turbofan jet engines. These new engines, they actually cool the air before it's released from the back of the jets. So the entire concept of a contrail chemtrail, specifically bringing your attention to the word con, which is not standing for condensation. It's actually a con. It really is. It's amazing if you get into the structure of words and all that. And I know that you're on the same page especially with your book and everything, that there's a lot more than meets the eye.
Oh, yeah.
But the contrail story of the condensation of water vapor because it's coming out so hot, that is a thing of the past. The new engines have cooled air, which cannot create the condensation that they claim, especially lingering for hours. I mean, let's just think about it.
So why is it that they only spray on certain days, and then you can have several days in a row where you get clear skies? Do we know why they do this?
Well, I think if they had the resources, they would do it every single day. There is a
You just can't get the stuff.
Exactly. What I've witnessed in North America, I've traveled across North America 11 times, 11 cross-country trips. Not all of those trips was I awake to this, but what I've witnessed is they've only got so many resources. They can do about half the country at once. Besides that, they're waiting for their normalization where they can push full scale ahead, their full scale deployment. The plan is to have a full scale launch. The name of the full scale launch is a Mount Pinatubo effect. Mount Pinatubo was a volcanic eruption in the Philippines about a decade ago. Supposedly, according to modern science, which I don't tend to trust very much, Mount Pinatubo's eruption put so much sulfuric dust in the atmosphere that the global mean temperature declined 1.5 degrees Celsius. So all of this dust in the atmosphere from this gigantic volcanic eruption in the Philippines, it shrouded the earth with so much dust, debris from the eruption that there wasn't enough sunlight getting in, that the global mean temperature declined. Now, they claim that global warming and climate change is so out of control, although I'm upon the understanding that global warming is a hoax, but that's just a whole nother story. First, let's just get people looking at the sky, right? Sure. But the nefarious characters that be, they have controlled the dialogue with this problem, reaction, solution, this Hegelian dialectic, and the problem is global warming. The solution is to block out our sun. And so they have created in Chicago last March on the anniversary of Mount St. Helens erupting, these 20 scientists met and they formed what they call the solar geoengineering governance regime. Okay, now the verbiage here is very important. Not only are they calling themselves a regime, but they are deeming themselves the sole entity that is in charge of governing this. So we're not talking about a theory. We are talking about a conspiracy, and this group of characters claim that they have, quote, the exclusive rights to saving the planet. That is the name of a paper released through Warren Buffett's school, Northwestern, and he's part of it. He's part of this New World Order globalist agenda, Warren Buffett, and they claim that they have exclusive rights to saving the planet through geoengineering. They claim that they don't have to follow any of the laws that are in place, and they claim that they have the technology and the ability to do so, so they have to launch a full-scale deployment, which they are calling a Mount Pinatubo effect. So they want to have the resources, which is they need a larger fleet of drones, essentially. And then with that, they want to go full-scale launch, completely block the sun, and keep blocking the sun until the global mean temperature of the planet has declined enough so that they say that they have saved global warming. Well, they're going to put us into an ice age is what they're really going to do. And with no scrutiny and no...
the arrogance of these sick, psychopathic individuals is just... It beggars belief. Who the fuck do these people think they are? These are our skies. This is our sun that we all live under, that we have a right to live under. And there's just this small number of individuals that think they've got the right to dictate the conditions that the rest of us live under. It's just unbelievable that they can be so mentally deranged to think this way, and that the rest of us put up with it. You know, these people literally see themselves as gods, and that's a little revealing glimpse into the mindset of the psychopathic elite ruling class.
Exactly, and I can't express my frustration much more eloquently than you just did. This is why I've devoted my entire existence to exposing and stopping this.
You know, you look at somebody like David Keith, who's featured in your documentary, and look into his eyes when he's speaking, and you can just see the psychopathy there. This guy is out of control. He belongs in a lunatic asylum or a prison, and yet he really does seem to believe what he's saying. He really does seem to believe that he and his cronies have got the right to be doing this to the rest of us.
He must be some sort of product of mind control, I would imagine. I can't imagine any human being with a conscience consciously doing something so evil, because this is going to affect billions of lives. Now, we have established rights. We have the human right to a say in environmental decision making. A lot of these rights are being completely violated and completely ignored. And as we see the media, which the thing is the media is completely controlled. 20 years ago, the media was controlled by over 50 companies. It's been consolidated down into a handful of 5 companies that control the dialogue, they control the narrative, they control the entire conversation, they control both sides of the argument. Of course, they're going to get their way when they are both sides of the argument, okay? And so what's going on as we speak is this process of a media normalization, where the media is not only simultaneously bashing people who would ever think that there's these chemical trails coming from jets. Okay, it's quite genius. I hate to call it that, but it is a genius thing that they are doing, because they are simultaneously attacking the truth while launching their agenda, which is geoengineering. So geoengineering is a synonym for chemtrails. They also call it stratospheric aerosol injections. They also call it solar radiation management. All these words are to confuse us, okay? So the media has launched these numerous campaigns to demonize people who use the word chemtrails, calling these people crazy conspiracy theorists, while at the exact same time saying that we need geoengineering to save the planet. Solar geoengineering, which is the blocking of the sun with aerosolized metallics released from planes. So just to get people up to speed to this inconvenient, treasonous reality that we're now living in. I now live in southern United States, in the state called Arizona, okay? And in Arizona, David Keith, who he's featured in the film, he is the boogeyman. He is this nefarious character. He is the patent holder. There's this royal society, and it's just a handful of characters, and he's one of them, along with Bill Gates. Bill Gates publicly funds this solar geoengineering program, not Bill Gates, Melinda Gates Foundation, but literal private donations from Bill Gates. This is public information, and they are the patent holders on this technology. So not only are they making lots of money on this, but they're poisoning our children, our animals, the plants. There's tree die-offs. There's so many horrible things that are happening. And as they normalize this and push for full-scale deployment, it's only going to get worse. So what's going on in Tucson, Arizona, which is in southern Arizona, is David W. Keith, through this media normalization and conditioning, what they want to do is convince the public so that there's not, riots in the street. Because if everybody really knew about this truth, heads would roll.
Well, it's
I'm
treason.
not kidding.
It's like
if everyone knew about this, there would be a revolution. People would be so upset.
Yeah, it is total treason.
It's the worst form of treason. I mean, it's an attack. It's an attack on a planet. It's an attack on humanity.
And it's quite ingenious the way they framed everything, because they've given us a guilty conscience collectively. We're made to feel guilty that it's us going about our daily business and driving our dirty cars that's causing climate change, that's brought the need for these measures to be introduced, when it's all a big scam and a lie anyway, of course, but that's what they're relying on, us feeling like we're parasites, like we're the cause of the problem. And the big elephant in the room is that dirty, expensive internal combustion engines using fossil fuels could have been rendered obsolete decades ago. If free energy technology from Tesla, for instance, had been adopted, we could all be driving electric cars if we weren't presided over by greedy, parasitic psychopaths who depend on the fossil fuel industry, the very same ones that tell us we're to blame for our own demise and that they're the only ones with the right to provide the solutions. I mean, when you really sit down and think about it, it's infuriating.
Well, yes, I agree. And the thing about blaming our carbon emissions is, first of all, you cannot have a conversation about global warming without talking about the elephant in the room, which is the ionospheric heating technologies.
Right.
It started with this frequency control through this Tesla technology that is called Haarp. Okay, Haarp was an antenna array built in Alaska that superheated the atmosphere to create high pressure bubbles, to steer jet streams, to make hurricanes, to literally steer around weather patterns. If you can create high pressure, you can steer weather. Now, this technology has been consolidated, and there are dozens of ionospheric heaters all over the planet. And what they do in conjunction with the geoengineering agenda is they superheat the metallicized, aerosolized metallics are administered into the atmosphere, and this frequency technology, these ionospheric heaters, they superheat the atmosphere. So if we're going to talk about global warming, we have to talk about the superheating of the atmosphere with this technology. So all of that aside, our consent has not been requested considering the blocking of our sun.
Exactly.
And the only thing that they can do is try to spoon feed it to us and tell us that it's something that we need desperately.
All right, so let's talk about the film itself, Frankenskies. That came out early in 2017, I believe. Is that right?
I released it on YouTube, the director's cut, in mid-June, so in the summer.
Oh, right, okay. So the film starts out with a history of weather manipulation at the hands of governments going back decades, and it crosses international boundaries as well. So what we have now with this modern agenda is the culmination of many, many years of governments feeling they can meddle with nature, right, and weaponizing the weather.
Yes, exactly. And what's amazing about the film is there's really no denying it once you see the chronology of the historic events beginning all the way back in the 1930s. They were sharpening their tools leading up to Vietnam. And come Vietnam, the American war machine decided to use weather as a weapon. And they did so by flooding the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They made it flood. Ironically enough, they used dry ice to seed the clouds, which is carbon dioxide, the exact thing that we're being told is poisoning the earth via our carbon emissions, right? So just after Project Popeye, where the Ho Chi Minh Trail was flooded by the U.S. Air Force, there was an international treaty signed banning weather as a weapon of war. But there was one interesting caveat in that treaty that said you can use weather as a weapon against your own populace, just not against other countries.
Oh, well, that's okay then.
Yeah.
You couldn't make it up, and you don't have to. Another aspect of the film concerns weather forecasters. You know, these nice-looking guys and women that get up there on screen with a nice toothpaste smile telling us what the weather's going to be the following day. Now, these agencies, these organizations that these weather forecasters work for have got to be in on it, right? I mean, it's a question as to whether the individual forecasters themselves, those that go there on screen, know what's going on or whether they're just reading a script. But certainly organizations like the Met Office in the UK and whatever its American equivalents would be have got to be down with the program, and they've got to be complicit in covering it all up.
Well, yeah, it's exactly true. And I'd like to hope that some of these meteorologists are in the dark and just reading their script. But I mean, they must know. They have a background in meteorology, you know. So what was very shocking when I started really doing some intense research a couple years ago were a few documents that I came across. One of them that I can get back to later is the Tropospheric Aerosol Program through the Department of Energy. This document in 2001, the thing is when I first started getting into this, there was this big debate. Should we use the word chemtrail? Should we use the word geoengineering? Well, that debate alone was a CIA operative. Okay, so ultimately, those two words were pigeonholing. They were confining us to this argument that the powers that be, when they were releasing their documents, they basically went behind closed doors and said, don't use the word chemtrails, don't use the word geoengineering, everything else we can do. So in the document that I'm mentioning, Tropospheric Aerosol Program of the Department of Energy, which is easily found if you search, but you have to know those key words, Tropospheric Aerosol Program. Okay, this document outlines the entire budget of the spraying program, how they're going to spray, what they're going to spray, how much money they're going to use to make sure that no one catches them in the act. $4 million they devoted to the 2001 operations of risk mitigation and making sure that no one caught them. Okay, so that all gets really involved, and the Department of Energy is totally in on it. But the most staggering document that I ever came across was civil society actors meeting in Washington, D.C. Okay, this meeting occurred with, I believe it was 30 people, but I'm sure there were a lot more. Okay, and what it was is something called civil society actors. Okay, and just that alone is this, I'm trying not to curse here. It's a total mind boggle, okay?
I would go ahead, man. Don't worry about it. It's a
total
mindfuck,
mind
right?
fuck. It's a total mind fuck, Mark. Because as you know, the truth lies in these it's hidden in plain sight. And the words, you know, there's so much detail in the words. And what a civil society actor is a participant in society, a non-governmental participant in society that plays a role as an actor to persuade the will of the populace. Okay, literally, if you look it up, the civil society actors, they persuade the will of society. Okay, and what these civil society actors in this meeting, as they met in Washington, D.C., they discussed, well, how are we going to convince the world that they need geoengineering? And another participant quoted in the document, which I'd be happy to share with you. It's so easy to find if you just look up civil society actors meeting Washington, D.C. Okay, one participant said, well, society is not good at strategy, but we are good at strategy. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to create this problem reaction solution where they're going to be left with no choice but to geoengineer the planet. And in this meeting, these civil society actors were not just controlled opposition, which is absolutely disgusting, people pretending to be activists and then misdirecting and misleading the dialogue, controlling the narrative, making sure that the society only uses these key terms, chemtrails and geoengineering, which creates this duality where if you use the word chemtrails, you're demonized as a conspiracy theorist. How could you say that they're spraying us with aluminum? But if you use the word geoengineering, you're a genius. And please God, spray us with aluminum, you see? And it creates this duality where science versus conspiracy, and there's only one right way, which is geoengineering. Now, also at this civil society actors meeting were the meteorologists and the players, like the head of NOAA and the Weather Channel. And all of these people had to get on the same page so that they knew what narrative to display to the public so that they could control the dialogue and control the outcome. Ultimately, it's absolutely disgusting and it's treasonous, and these criminals need to be exposed.
It's exactly what it is. It is treason. And civil society actors sounds just one step away from lifetime actors, which is a concept I get into a lot in my book and in my talks. Lifetime actors are people that you've heard of, basically, that are in the public eye. It could be a politician, could be a Hollywood actor, TV presenter, musician, and we think of them as one thing. But the truth of the matter is, when you look into their backgrounds and their family bloodlines and their affiliations, they're actually steering culture off in desired directions, according to the elite ruling class, and they sweep up all these members of the public with them, Pied Piper-like, because they've come to be respected in their fields, whatever it may be. Lifetime actors. So it's all deception, whichever way you cut it, deception and duplicity.
One of those that makes me absolutely sick is Leonardo Dicaprio. He's pushing for mitigation to climate change, which is ultimately geoengineering. You can see him holding up signs, and even their gang symbols. They flash these gang symbols with their hands, these Illuminati representative gang symbols for this new world order and this one world government. It's quite staggering and disgusting.
Well, it really is. And don't get me started on guys like Bono. Anyway, it does get confusing as to whether geoengineering is on the public record or not, because as your film acknowledges, and as you've just mentioned there, you have certain agencies that will acknowledge it's going on, but they dress it up to sound benevolent and noble, selling us the story that it's for the greater good of protecting us all from climate change and it's for our own good. Then other times they deny it's happening, but they seem to be paving the way for themselves to do it one day by saying, oh, well, we may have to do that in the future. We may have to do what we've just told you we're currently not. And then other times you get government agencies that straight out deny it's going on. I actually wrote a letter to David Cameron, the pig-worrying former British Prime Minister when he was in office, and demanded to know why he was allowing this agenda to continue. And I got a letter back saying, sorry, there is no geoengineering. We're not doing it. Don't know what you're talking about. So, you know, all very confusing. They don't all appear to be on the same page with it all.
Which is absolutely true. But if you really look into it, they have governance bodies in place to not only govern the ongoing spraying, but to govern the full-scale deployment of it all. So when there is a geoengineering governance regime, a self-proclaimed regime established, and there is a budget starting in 2001 that outlines all of the hundreds of millions of dollars that they're going to spend on drone fleets and on ground-based systems to monitor these different plumes of chemicals, and the entire outline is drawn up and displayed in front of us. It's hard to really believe that it's not ongoing.
Well, exactly. And there's the small matter of using your eyes and looking up as well, which shouldn't be discounted. You've got a great sequence in the documentary from a female former Air Force pilot, Megan, I forget her other name, I'm sure you can remind me. But she's become a whistleblower, and it's shown that she does indeed have a conscience. And there must be many more like her, I would imagine, that have come to realise what it is they've been a part of, but who, for whatever reason, don't feel brave enough to come forward, or they're intimidated or threatened not to. I think she intimated as such in what she has to say on the film.
Yes, Kristen Megan Edwards of the U.S. Air Force. She started waking up by using her critical thinking skills and seeing these mass amounts of barium, aluminum, and strontium coming in to the system and going out and disappearing, but showing up in the air and the soil and what have you. She was threatened by, well, she's received numerous threats, I believe. She was on the fence with coming to speak at the first global summit to end geoengineering, which I hosted. I've changed the name. It was first the Global Chemtrail Summit, but the word chemtrail really ruffles people's feathers, so I've changed it now to the Global Summit to End Geoengineering, because at least I can play their game a little bit by using the dialogue, the terminology that they've created, so that I don't get completely demonized and attacked, and maybe I can get some unbiased media coverage. But Kristen Megan Edwards wants to speak more. She wants to come to these conferences, but she's been spoken to, and her newborn child and her entire life and livelihood has been threatened. And she publicly says that she's been threatened and she just can't risk it. You know, honestly, I think that if you're going to get in the public eye and be a whistleblower, that it's all or nothing. Nothing's going to prevent me from speaking the truth. I'll take this to the grave. I believe that I've got a lot more time to be vocal and be loud. And, it's just the truth. The truth is like this. It's a frequency. And once you start sharing it and that 100th monkey starts, unfolding and unraveling, there's no stopping it. It's just, we have to realize the value of our individual voice. People get caught up in their peers and what their peers are going to think, what their family is going to think. And is it the right thing? Am I really just a conspiracy hoot? But here's one thing that can really empower people. So in this tropospheric aerosol program document outlined by the Department of Energy, there's a lot of mention of precursor gases. So what is going on in the sky? If you've got enough sky to watch, I know some places, especially over in your neck of the woods, gets geoengineered almost every day. So there's not really any irregular pattern of appearance. It's just always chemtrailed. But if you do witness blue skies, which a lot of people on Earth do still, but that's going to be a thing of the past. So it's up to us to hone in on our discernment now. And what happens is when you've got blue skies, the precursor gas drones will come. And what they're laying out is a barium solution, barium salts, and I call them primer planes, okay? And one of the things that really got me credibility amongst my peers was being able to predict 100%, brother, 100%. I could predict when the grid pattern, when these persistent linear cirrus cloud formations were going to show up and completely grid and block out the sun and completely grid the sky. Okay. And what it is when you see what's called a contrail, which it's another word, it's just the details of the word. The contrail is a complete con. What you have are these drones or planes that are leaving these shorter dispersals that seem to dissipate. Well, it's just a different gas, okay? Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And they're laying out barium, okay? The drones, planes will show up in masses and they will crisscross the sky with these shorter dispersals, okay? Opposed to the longer persistent trails, these persist for like a dozen seconds, okay? But what it is they're leaving barium and they'll crisscross the sky still and keep it up. And if they do it for a couple days, then you know that on day 3, they're going to come and spray the sky with the aluminum and completely grid the sky. And once you get to the point where you can predict when they're going to grid the sky, then you can earn your credibility of your peers. And then they'll really start looking up and question what's going on.
Yeah, well, that's a great point. And weather presenters lying to us is one thing, but the real problem comes from those who actually put these activities into reality. So we're talking the pilots, but I know your film also implied that in a lot of cases it's pilotless drones that are spraying this crap. But it's still the same situation because even when you've got drones, you've got an individual who's operating those drones. So the question becomes, what the hell is wrong with these people? Whether it's pilots, whether it's drone operators, whether it's somebody operating some remote control device that triggers this stuff in planes that are already in the air. Either way, you've got human beings there with families, with friends that have to live in the results of what they're doing. What the hell is wrong with these people? Are they mind controlled into doing this? Do they just buy the lie? It's just insane. Without these people to put this stuff into manifestation, there goes the problem.
Well, Mark, I've analyzed this a lot. This is all I think about. This is my life. I devoted my entire life to exposing and stopping this crime against humanity 3 years ago, and I'm not going to stop until we have blue skies for our children. And so, given it so much thought and really getting deep and really getting into my intuition, I've broken it down into 3 specific categories, okay? And this doesn't just apply to the Air Force pilots. It applies to a lot of different sectors, such as the vaccine program and the fluoridation and what have you. And what it is it is indoctrination, number 1. Step 2, compartmentalization. Step 3, need-to-know basis. So if you apply this to the Air Force pilots, indoctrination, compartmentalization, need-to-know basis, that's enough to keep them in the dark, to keep them thinking, well, I'm doing something for national security, I'm saving the planet from global warming, this and that, and it keeps them completely like sheltered from the rest of the world, thinking that they can't share it because it's national security. On top of that, yes, I think there's a lot of mind control going on. I think that I did a whole show. I hosted the Jordan Maxwell show and interviewed an amazing MK Ultra victim. And I did a whole 2-hour show on MK Ultra. And the facts are real. The truth is staggering. And there is an MK Ultra program that has branched off into so many different sectors and so many different departments, and it's global. And it involves satanic ritual abuse and all these things. But not just that, it involves frequency mind control of the masses. Okay, I've actually witnessed it when I lived in Vancouver, Canada. I happened to be coming back from the second Global Chemtrail Summit that I hosted in Portland, Oregon, which is in the northwest of the United States. And upon arriving to Vancouver, Canada, the ionosphere had been lowered. Okay, so the clouds were really, really low, and you could see a tight ripple of frequencies going through the entire city. But not just that, you could drop a pin in the city and everyone would hear it. The entire city was silent. There wasn't an ambulance. There wasn't a honking horn. Everybody was in this kind of zombie-like mind control state. And I started researching it, and ironically enough, synchronized another person on my team of researchers sent me this information that day without me even asking about the manipulation of the ionosphere to bounce these frequency waves off of the ground to hug the ground like an ELF wave does to completely mind control an entire city. And come to find out, Vancouver, Canada was doing a war game scenario, a frequency EMF war game scenario with the United States to see what they could do with their war toys. And they can and do this. So keep your eye to the sky and really register what's going on with your body, because there's mind control going on. Even your television is a mind control device. You know, there's so many layers of it. But once they get really deep, indoctrinated, compartmentalized, and on a need-to-know basis, I do believe that these people, these robot people, you know, they think that they're doing something good, probably because they're completely mind-controlled one way or another.
Even though they're like mind-controlled drones themselves. All it would take is a bit of digging around online or a friend to send them a video link or whatever, and it puts a different slant on things, and suddenly they realise that the program they're a part of is not necessarily for the good of humanity, but it's actually harming people. So their overlords probably are very keen to keep them away from doing that kind of research for themselves.
Well, and how true is that? That's why I can't stress enough this 100th monkey thing. You know, like, people do not value their own voice. Okay, your voice is your weapon. You tell one person, they tell someone else, and all of a sudden the film Frankenskies gets in the right hand, and one of these drone operators wakes up to the truth, and then he wakes up one of his friends, and he wakes up one of his friends, and all of a sudden they're setting up guillotines in the street, and then David Keith's his head is rolling down the street, and we win. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not advocating for violence. I'm just saying that there in the past there's been revolutions, and it takes enough truth to get out there. You know, the truth is our weapon right now.
I just fantasize about a situation where you have military personnel, police officers, drone operators, chemtrail pilots, all standing up in their tens or hundreds of thousands and saying, "We're not doing this anymore. What you going to do about it?" If you have, you know, individuals in those numbers all coming together and just saying, "We're not doing it. We're just not doing it," quitting their jobs, quitting their posts, you know, the overlords that employ these people, they're hardly likely to climb into the planes themselves and go off and fight foreign wars themselves. They need their foot soldiers, and without their foot soldiers, they're nothing. So I just long for the day when that happens. I've no idea if it's going to happen in my lifetime or at all, but that's the best case scenario that we can all wish for.
You gave me the chills when you said that, brother, and I can't wait to see the day that people start to think for themselves. I have this quote that I may have said earlier. I say it all the time. I say it on just about every show I go to. I say it on almost every show I go on. You can take authority as the truth, or you can take truth as the authority. And all it's going to take is for these people in these positions of power to start to take truth as the authority. That's it.
What you were saying about the city of Vancouver, when there was that eerie, quiet sort of atmosphere and everything felt very strange, it put me in mind of the movie Vanilla Sky with Tom Cruise, where he's in Times Square and, you know, it's just completely silent. There's no traffic around. It's just completely deserted. And so much of what we see happening in reality reads like the plot to a Hollywood movie. So you could take this whole agenda, and if you said to the average person, you know, imagine a scenario where they're spraying the skies every day with all this crap and people are getting ill from it and they're blocking out the sunlight. A lot of people, I think, would come back at you and say, oh, that's a bit far-fetched. That sounds like the plot to some Hollywood movie. So much of what we see happening, you know, is just like a really bad film plot. And yet it's real.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you know what's amazing is you're so spot on. We've been indoctrinated and we've been culturalized and we've been engineered. Our entire society has been engineered. And not just that, is this has been in the works for so long that our mental constructs have been built to the point that reality is stranger than fiction.
Exactly.
Okay. So when I start going out and I start passing out flyers to people, which I do every single day, I don't leave the house without a flyer, and you wouldn't believe the kind of interactions that I have and the amazing like-minded people that I meet just by having the power of this flyer. And I've been sending flyers all over the world, actually. I had a crowdfund to raise money for my film. I funneled all that movie into printing out tens of thousands of stacks of flyers, bringing awareness to my websites, to my film. And you know what people say when I tell them, did you know that there's a nefarious agenda to block out the sun? They all say, oh, you mean like the Matrix? And then it makes me think, oh my goodness, we've been conditioned already years back. They had this plan. They've had this plan. If you watch the film Frankenskies, you can really absorb the scope of it all. And this has been going on for some time. They've had an agenda to control the sunlight, to control the rain, to control the sky, to control the weather, to control all of it. And it's been in the works for quite some time. So they have to precondition us with Hollywood. So they've been doing it. And even the word vanilla sky, our skies are being whitened to a vanilla color.
There you go. More to the naming of that movie than meets the eye. Mm-hmm. And that's what struck me about the events of 9/11. You know, if in the years prior to 2001, if a whole bunch of people had come out of a movie theatre and they've just watched a film where terrorists had flown planes into the Twin Towers, and you'd said, what did you think of the movie? I can imagine them saying, well, it's quite a good film, but the plot, come on now. You know, the plot was just so far-fetched, it was ridiculous. And yet, that's what we got.
It's textbook preemptive programming. So what they do is push the envelope so far on the screen that when it happens in reality, you're already used to it. And you'd think nothing of it because you've been programmed to a dystopian reality that you're all of a sudden okay with because you saw it on a screen.
That's right. That's why they call them television programs. What about commercial airlines being on board with the geoengineering program then? Because I've heard various suggestions that certain well-known airlines might be knowingly taking part in this. And there's also the idea that commercial airlines might be involved on an unwitting basis, that there's something that's triggered by remote control in the engines that's putting this stuff out. There's got to be some complicity somewhere in terms of getting this stuff onto the airplanes in the first place, of course. But is there any evidence to prove that any well-known commercial airlines are knowingly taking part in this? And are there any names we can mention?
Well, you know, this is one thing that really does scare people away because of the vast scope of the program. The answer to your question is yes, there are commercial airlines in on it, and a lot of them. The proof is the public with their eye to the sky. There's sprayers that are being turned on and off. There are planes that are being tracked by different flight routes where they get over certain spots and the sprayers all of a sudden turn on. I've witnessed myself Virgin Airlines. I've been sent multiple photographs from Ryanair. I know you guys have them over there.
Oh,
I mean, if
They're
you think If you think about the Black Ops budget, for instance, at the Pentagon. Now, the day before 9/11, the Pentagon came out and announced that they were missing $2.3 trillion, okay? And then all of the accountants that were supposed to be taking care of this problem all went and met in one room that got hit by the missile/plane, and they all died the next morning, okay? Now, that $2.3 trillion was a really big number. But since then, even larger numbers have come out. So now the Pentagon recently announced that they're missing $4 trillion, okay? Now, not just that, but after 9/11, the Black Ops budgets went through the roof. And the people who signed these checks for these Black Ops budgets, over half of the checks that go out, they don't even know what they're going to because they're top secret. They're Black Ops for national security. So we've got this rogue, treasonous element within our military. And I say our because the U.S., Britain, the European Union, we're all under the same umbrella of militarized treason. And what is going on is there is lots of money being spent on these projects. Even NASA has a budget of, last year it was $54 million a day. This year is $52 million a day. NASA has a public program called the Charged Aerosol Release Experiment. They call it CARE, C-A-R-E, where they make noctilucent clouds, ionized clouds, by spraying aluminum, barium, and strontium into the atmosphere to do testing. They claim that they use the atmosphere as a laboratory. That's a NASA quote, using the atmosphere as a laboratory. And this is a public project that some of their $53 million a day that they spend is on spraying the sky with chemicals to make fake clouds. So the scope of the budget is so vast that trillions of dollars are being funneled to the airlines as well. I mean, why do you think Ryanair is so cheap? Because their planes are outfitted with sprayers, and they are up. And if you think about it, if you're running this agenda, these planes, these commercial jets, they're where you need to be spraying. So instead of deploying your own aircraft and your own drones, you just have these remote sensors. And when you know where these certain craft are, you open up the sprayers, and voila, they're part of the entire agenda. Terry Lawton, who I'm flying into the United States for the next global chemtrail summit, or the next summit to end geoengineering, in Tucson on May 5th, Tucson, Arizona. So in Tucson, Arizona, on May 5th, I mentioned earlier, this is where they're launching and normalizing chemtrails as a solution. And once their experiment with David Keith is complete, and the media has shoved it down our throats that they've blocked the sun successfully, they're going to launch full-scale deployment on planet Earth, and no one will have sunshine for the rest of our lives. It's a very important moment in the history of humanity. So we have to all come together. And so if you really think about it, and you see the research from Terry Lawton on his website, climatechangeagenda.com, Terry Lawton out of Ireland, out of County Wexford, I believe, he's got amazing photos of these Ryanair fleets outfit with sprayers, okay? And if you zoom in, when the sprayers get turned on and off, because there's so much footage from people looking up at the skies and getting pissed and filming it and saying, what the heck is this, okay? And there's sprayers being turned on and off at random times, okay? These engines aren't all of a sudden producing condensation. These engines aren't being turned on and off. There's sprayers on the wingtips that are being triggered at certain junctures to form the trails, to mix these chemicals at certain places and times.
Now,
and so
are the pilots of the aircraft doing this, or is this happening remotely?
I would say the pilots are completely indoctrinated, compartmentalized, and on a need-to-know basis. And I believe that the pilots do not know anything about it.
Right. Yeah, Ryanair, it's pretty devastating stuff. But then the chief executive of Ryanair, Michael O'Leary, who's a thoroughly unpleasant individual, is on the board of the Bilderberg Group. So maybe we shouldn't be too surprised.
And he's got affiliations with David W. Keith. In my film, that talks about, that was Virgin Air, pardon me. Virgin Air awarded millions of dollars to David W. Keith, who's the primary solar geoengineer. So these guys are all part of this Royal Society. Okay, and this Royal Society, they have all of the geoengineering patents. Okay, so not only are they spraying us with poison, but they're getting paid to do it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And I've taken so many Ryanair flights because they are so goddamn cheap. You know, you want to go to Rome, and British Airways want to charge you £100, and Ryanair will do it for 25. What are you going to do? You know, but having discovered that about them, I'm certainly going to be taking fewer Ryanair flights now, because there's also health implications for the passengers. I guess if you're sitting right over the wings, then these nanoparticles are going to be capable of seeping into the cabin as well.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment. I've got a viral video that just got 600,000 views in 2 months from my last global summit that I hosted, and I articulate the entire agenda, and I dig deep into the... Sorry, there's a plane flying over really low, but it doesn't have a chemtrail. Okay, so there's this thing called the aerotoxicity syndrome. And this is another elephant in the room that you cannot deny. It is called aerotoxicity syndrome. And so in 1996, the U.S. Air Force came out with a document saying that they wanted to own the weather by 2025. And during that time frame, people that have a memory and people that look at the sky and people that look at clouds, they started to notice a statistically significant uptick in these persistent linear cirrus cloud formations overhead. The skies started being gridded in 1996 when they weren't before. In 1996 also is when the aerotoxicity syndrome all of a sudden occurred. And what it is flight attendants started getting incredibly ill from these metallics. They started getting heavy metal poisoning from the air that they're breathing up there at cruising altitude. You know, I mean, yeah, some of us fly a good bit, but those flight attendants are completely being poisoned.
Exactly. So there's a real urgency here, Matt, and it comes down to the burden of responsibility. And there's a very real sense in which ours is the last generation that can turn this situation around before it becomes irreversible. And we shouldn't have to bear that responsibility. We should be able to just go about our lives and enjoy our time with our families and doing what we want to do. But unfortunately, because humanity has been collectively asleep at the wheel, and we've allowed this satanic control system to surge forward unchallenged, our generation is now reaping the consequences of that lack of care. And now we have to do something about it. So what contributions can those listening to this broadcast do? You know, if people are sitting there thinking, well, I'd like to get involved, but I don't know what my input could be, what can people do to help the process?
Well, your statement is completely correct. We're one generation away from a completely dystopian reality where our children will not get to witness blue skies or sunlight like we witnessed. Exactly. Okay. And we have generations in our past, our bloodline, our ancestors, they fought for the freedoms that we now take for granted. Okay. They fought against everything. I mean, segregation, all of these treasonous acts were accounted for, and now we have these freedoms that we're about to lose. So I like to tell people, if you can knit for truth. Okay. If you can help financially, then please, reach out to me. I've got different options of help, but you can reach out to me in my email, Frankenskies at gmail.com. Pardon me, Frankenskies at gmail.com. I actually have a crowdfund where you can order the DVD Frankenskies, which is gofundme.com/Frankenskies. But if you reach out to me, I can put you in the ability to help. If you're sitting at home and you don't want to really get active, you can at least share the truth with your friends. You can put it on your social media. You can put it on your Instagram. You can print flyers. You can get out there, make eye contact with people, and start the domino effect that we so desperately need. The thing about chemtrails, the thing about geoengineering is that there are so many people in the dark because the agenda is so large and so critical that the powers that be have done such an amazing job brainwashing the populace. And I hate to use the word brainwashing, but I woke up just a few years ago. We all go through our indoctrination processes in school. It just takes certain circumstances to snap us out of it. But like I said, everybody can do something. Even if it's putting up one flyer in your local coffee shop, you don't know the impact that you can have. If you can help financially, I mean, I desperately need it because I'm going to be making a sequel. The sequel is going to get into frequency control, synthetic biology, Morgellons, the AI, this artificial intelligence that's about to take over the entire planet, and how to empower yourself with health and be able to get all of this out of you and to detox and to chelate the heavy metals and to really step above it, because we're sovereign beings. And the reason why we're under attack is because we are so powerful. They don't want us to know our true abilities.
Let me ask you, did getting involved in geoengineering research open you up to other aspects of the truth game, so-called? Did that turn you on to other aspects of truth and conspiracy research so that you could see the bigger picture and other aspects of it?
What's amazing, Mark, is I've been analyzing that a lot because I kept always saying to myself, I don't think it's just chemtrails. I don't think it's
you speak
just
like a seasoned
chemtrails.
Truther.
Yes, and thank you very much. Truth is a frequency, okay? Nikola Tesla had it right. Everything is frequency, and truth is exactly that. Truth is a frequency, and once you start really resonating with truth, there's no stopping it, and all these other truths become self-evident. And I hate to get biblical, but the truth really does set you free. Okay, so it did. It started with chemtrails, and then all these other truths started unfolding, and I just literally kind of have to ask the universe for these different truths, and they just kind of come forward, and everything just becomes self-evident. I can't believe the amount of knowledge and wisdom that I've gained in just the past 1 year, not to mention the past 2, 3, 4 years. But yes, it's amazing. Once you start resonating with that truth, it starts to unfold, and you learn about discernment and intuition, because with all of the fake news and the disinformation, misinformation, propaganda that we're exposed to, it's up to us to resonate deep inside of our souls to find the real truth.
Well, absolutely. And people come into it in different ways. Some people might be researching 9/11. Other people, like me, might be looking at occult symbolism in music videos and stuff like that. And you discover that it really is all interlinked. And whatever area you choose to specialize in, it's just one small aspect of the overall big picture. And I just want to take the opportunity to commend you for your activism, because I certainly admire people that get out there on the front line and change their lives, just give up their jobs and turn their back on everything they were doing previously just to dedicate themselves totally to the cause. And I certainly commend you for that. And like you were saying, everyone's got their own contribution to make. So I'm not really much of an activist. I mean, I would like to be, but I'm not really one for getting out there on the front line and waving banners around and bellowing through bullhorns or even putting leaflets out. I like to think that I'm pretty decent at doing radio shows and writing books and doing talks, and so I focus on that. But there'll be somebody else that is great getting out there and getting up in people's faces and thrusting flyers in their hands and talking to them about stuff, and that's the contribution they can make. They might be lousy at putting radio shows together and they're useless at writing, but that's something they can do. And you even said, knit for truth, or just whatever you can do. Everyone's got some kind of gift, some kind of skill that can be put to use for this cause, because like you said, there is an urgency. We are the last generation that decides whether this thing gets turned around or whether we get thrust into perpetual slavery. That's the bottom line. That's what it comes down to.
That's exactly right, brother. And I'd like to correct you. You are an actual activist. Your show and your talks, they empower and they inspire not just myself, but everyone listening, and especially the youth, And if we can get to the youth and empower and inspire and light that fire under the right asses, then we're doing our job. So I commend you for your efforts. Thank you so much, brother.
All right. Well, I take the point. So the follow-up to Frankenskies, what kind of timeline are we looking at with that?
I'd like to have it out next summer. Time is but of the essence.
All right. Just recap on where people can get hold of the first film, and also, are there any other upcoming events or conferences or anything like that you'd like to plug at this time?
Well, my baby is actualactivists.com. Okay, Actual Activists is a play on words. I've got the act, so actual and activist. So it's kind of like this get off your ass and let's do something. But also it's like, are you an actual activist, or are you pretending to be an activist and you're really just controlled opposition? Because there's a lot of that in the geoengineering community. And then also, it's just a push. It's just a push to get people out there, to get people off the computer, and to actually do something, start a radio show, empower and inspire the youth. So actualactivists, plural.com. Please visit that site. That's really my hub. And then I've got Frankenskiesthemovie.com. Frankenskies can be found on Vimeo.com. It can be found on YouTube.com. Please visit Frankenskiesthemovie.com. There's a lot of useful information on there. And then upcoming conference I have on May 5th, which is Cinco de Mayo, the day that Mexico gained independence. Just down on the Mexican border is the town of Tucson, Arizona, where I'll be hosting the 3rd annual global summit to stop geoengineering. We're going to have some amazing speakers. We'll have live music, and we'll have a good old-fashioned protest to follow, a call to action to demand unbiased media coverage, and to tell the world that we do not consent to solar geoengineering.
Exactly. All right, Matt, thanks for coming on today, man, and all the best to you, brother.
My pleasure. Thanks for everything that you do, and have a good day.
This is just for fun. I'm picking up vibrations. I'm picking up good vibrations. I'm picking up